You've been handling everything alone your entire life, not because you wanted to, but because at some point you realized no one was coming. And once you realize that, you don't unlearn it, you adjust to it, and then you build your entire way of living around it. It's 1974, you come home from school, the house is empty, no voices, no movement, no one asking how your day was. You don't check for anyone, you already know. No one is coming for hours, so you do what you always do. You put your bag down, you walk into the kitchen, you open the fridge, you stand there for a second. Not because you're hungry, but because you're thinking, what now? You close it again. You figure something out, because that's what you do every day. And that moment, right there, is more important than it looks, because nothing about it feels unusual to you. This isn't a one-time situation. This is Tuesday. This is Wednesday. This is every single afternoon. And when something becomes that normal, it doesn't feel like an experience. It feels like who you are. If you grew up in the late 60s, the 70s, or the early 80s, this wasn't rare. This wasn't extreme. This was normal. And if that was your normal, then there's something about you that most people don't fully understand. You don't ask for help, not because you don't need it, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped expecting it. And that shift doesn't happen in one moment. It happens slowly, quietly, without you even noticing. One afternoon at a time, you figure something out. No one helps. You deal with something. No one steps in. You make a mistake. You fix it yourself. And over time, a pattern forms. And once that pattern is there, it becomes automatic. And people misread that. They call you distant, guarded, too independent. But that's not what this is. This is something that was built, layer by layer. Before you were old enough to understand what was happening, because nobody chooses this. It develops in a very specific kind of environment, an environment where there is no buffer, no one stepping in, no one smoothing things out, no one translating the situation for you. You act. Something happens, you deal with it, you get it wrong, you adjust, or you live with the consequence. And this changes something fundamental. You stop waiting. Waiting becomes useless. So you start anticipating instead. You think ahead. You prepare. You solve problems before they fully exist. Because that's safer. Because that's what worked. It's the middle of the afternoon. You're alone in the house. The clock ticks. The refrigerator hums. The house makes small sounds. You hear everything. Because there's nothing else. You sit down. You turn on the TV. Not because you're watching, but because silence feels too present. And even that, you handle on your own. No one checks in, no one asks how you're doing, and without anyone explaining it, you learn something. You are responsible, not officially, no one said it out loud. But practically, you are, because there is no one else. And that belief sits deep. There's a name for this. A life where you learn early that outcomes depend on you. No safety net, no soft landing, just action and consequence. And once that becomes your baseline, you don't question it anymore. But there was another side to it. Something people today romanticize without fully understanding it. Freedom. Real freedom. You left the house. No phone, no tracking, no updates. You disappeared for hours. You went places. You figured things out. You got into situations. And you solved them. No one coached you. No one explained how to feel. No one mediated your reactions. You just lived it. And that built something. Something most people today never had to develop. The ability to handle things without needing someone else to guide you through it. And that ability doesn't leave you, even now, decades later. You still process things internally. You still pause before accepting help. Not because you're proud, not because you want to struggle, but because your system doesn't expect it. And while all of that was happening at home, something else was happening around you. The world wasn't stable. Watergate, Vietnam, the oil crisis, layoffs, factories closing. You didn't analyze it. You weren't old enough for that, but you felt it. You felt that things weren't fixed, that systems could fail, that promises didn't always hold. And that adds another layer. Because now it's not just, I handle things myself. It becomes, don't rely too much on things you can't control, because they can fail, and you've seen it happen. And once that belief settles in, it stays, quietly, in the background, shaping everything, the way you read people, the way you scan situations before trusting them, the way you wait for proof instead of believing words, the way you always prepare for things not going the way they should, not because you're negative, because you're calibrated to reality. And this is why you work the way you work. Hard, consistent, without talking about it. No announcements, no performance, no need to prove it. You just do what needs to be done. Because you learned early, no one is coming to fix it. And that creates another shift. Your value isn't what you say, it's what you can actually do. Because you've seen what happens when people rely on things outside themselves. You watched people do everything right and still lose everything. So you made a decision, maybe not consciously, but clearly, trust yourself. Because that's the only thing that is consistently held. And here's something most people don't understand about you. You don't ask for help. But if someone else needs help, you show up, immediately, without hesitation, without discussion, without needing recognition. You just do it. And then you move on. Because when you were growing up, people were the only thing that actually showed up. Not systems, not structures, not guarantees. People. The ones who were there when nothing else was. And that shaped something in you. A kind of loyalty that doesn't need to be explained, that doesn't need attention. It just exists. And that's why people get you wrong. You're not cold. You're just not performing warmth. You're not distant. You're just not announcing your loyalty. It shows up when it matters, quietly, the way everything does with you. And here's the part almost nobody says out loud. You don't talk about any of this, not because it wasn't hard, but because talking about it feels like complaining. And complaining was never part of the code you grew up inside. You handled things. You moved on. You didn't make it someone else's problem. That was it. And so you carried all of this quietly. The self-reliance, the awareness, the strength built from necessity, without recognition, without anyone stopping to say that was actually hard, and you handled it anyway. But carrying everything alone comes with a cost, not a dramatic one, a quiet one, the habit of not reaching out, even when it would help, the instinct to say I'm fine before you've even checked if that's true, the tendency to solve everything internally, even when you don't have to anymore, because the environment changed, but your system didn't, and sometimes that gap becomes visible, not to others, to you, in moments where help is there, but something in you hesitates, not out of fear, out of habit, and that's worth understanding. Because this isn't something you need to fix, it's something you need to see clearly. So here's what you actually are. Not cynical, realistic, not cold, self-contained, not distant, just practiced. Practiced at handling things, practiced at adapting, practiced at moving forward without waiting. You didn't choose this, you were shaped by it, by a specific time, a specific environment that asked things of you before you were old enough to decide, and you handled it the way you always have, on your own, and maybe it's time someone finally said it out loud. That was hard, and you handled it, and you're still here, and that means something. If this felt familiar, you're not the only one. There are more people like you than you realize. People who learned early to rely on themselves, people who built strength in silence, people who never made it a story, but carried it anyway. Drop a comment below. What do you remember most about those quiet afternoons? And if you want to understand why this shaped you the way it did, subscribe. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it.